the ultimate meal plan for longevity and vitality. That's something I'm going to talk about today, so stick around. Hi, my name is Hachiaki Takamiya, a 63-year-old biohacker based on Japanese natural health and the author of Live Wiser, Not Smarter. So I have been sharing with you about this World Longevity Summit held in Kyoto. And in this summit, the 4 secrets to longevity of Kyotango centenarians were shared. And one of the secrets was diet, especially high fiber diet. So in the last video, I shared with you a meal plan to meet your fiber RDA. However, I also made some videos about protein, like high protein intake or sufficient protein intake. So both fiber and protein are important. But there's a trade-off because if you increase your protein intake, you often end up decreasing your fiber intake because there's a limited space on your plate. So if you increase one thing, then you may have to decrease other nutrients and so on. So it's very difficult to have them all. So it is often a trade-off situation that not many experts talk about. They only focus on one element, such as protein, and they say, as long as you're meeting your protein goal, everything is fine, but it isn't. There are many other important factors in our health and longevity. So often it is a trade-off of protein and fiber. So that means longevity and vitality. So fiber can help your longevity, but some experts think that is not sufficient for vitality. You need higher protein intake so that you can avoid things like falls, which can cause bedridden situation, and then that will lead to developing other diseases and so on. So so that's a kind of a trade-off, really. So the best way is to find a sweet spot or find a good balance. So how to keep a good balance of the two? And not only about protein and fiber, you need to think about other nutrients too. For example, you need calcium and vitamin D for your bone health. You also need probiotics as well as fiber to support your gut health. Also, you need to think about the balance between autophagy and mTOR. Autophagy is a cellular recycling mechanism, and mTOR is a regulator of growth. When autophagy is activated, mTOR is suppressed. But if you activate mTOR, then autophagy is suppressed. So how to keep a balance? And because if you have a high protein diet, you're activating mTOR, that means you're suppressing autophagy too. So you need to think about this balance as well. So that's what I'll be sharing with you, how to keep a good balance of everything so that you can find a sweet spot of everything. So first, I'll share with you what longevity means or what lifespan extension means, and then what vitality means or about health span extension, and diet for muscle health, diet for bone health, diet for gut health, diet for brain health, and diet for anti-aging. And finally, considering all those aspects, meal plan for holistic health. So please watch the video until the end. Those of you who just discovered this video today, this is the Ikigai diet channel, which is a health and longevity channel. We usually cover things like diet, exercise, mindset, and sometimes we cover Japanese blue zones because there are several blue zones in Japan other than Okinawa, and we cover from traditional Japanese health method to modern Japanese health trends such as chokatsu. So basically, This is a channel about how to increase health span for people over 50 or over 60. So if you're interested, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you. Now, so what does longevity mean? People like David Sinclair talks about lifespan extension. And he says it is critical to stop the aging process because he regards aging is a disease. Aging is the biggest cause of most diseases. Therefore, by stopping or slowing down the aging process, you can protect yourself from most diseases. And in order to do that, it is critical to suppress mTOR. And to do that, you need to practice low protein diet. In other words, you need to avoid high protein diet. And people like Dr. Peter Attia, on the other hand, stresses health span extension rather than lifespan extension. So he means is vitality. You need vitality in old age because common causes of death is through falling. Many seniors fall and then they break a hip bone and you become bedridden and then you won't be able to exercise, you won't be able to move around, and then your body deteriorates very quickly, and eventually you start developing other diseases, and then that will lead to death. So protecting yourself from falling is one of the most critical elements to pursue health and longevity, according to Dr. Peter Thiel. Therefore, you need to be strong and you need to build vitality. And to do that, he recommends high protein diet. So basically, he is prioritizing muscle and bone health so that you can avoid bedridden situation because there's no point of living longer if you have to stay in bed in your marginal decade. Do longevity diet cause a bedridden situation? Longevity diet, what I mean is like, low protein diet or plant forward diet. Do they cause a bedridden situation or, are they not sufficient enough to be vital in old age? Well, if you look at the centenarian in the blue zones, they live longer, and that's what they're famous for. They're famous for their longevity, but they are vital as well. They're not bedridden. So they are over 100 years old and still moving around. So they achieved both longevity and vitality. And if you look at the diet of the blue zones, so we don't know exactly how much protein they were taking per day. There's no data available, but based on their diet, based on kind of food they're eating, we can kind of speculate. And roughly somewhere between 0.8 gram of protein per kilogram of your body weight to 1.1 gram of protein per kilogram of your body weight, which is kind of considered to be a low protein diet because some of the advocates of the high protein diet say you need, 1.6 gram or 2.2 gram per kilogram of body weight. And also, the blue zones diet are kind of plant forward. If it's not plant-based, it is at least plant forward. They probably eat some animal products such as fish or dairy or sometimes chicken or sometimes red meat. But amount is not so much. So it's definitely not animal-based diet. So I would say plant forward is the best description of their diet. So low protein, plant forward, but they achieve both longevity and vitality. So that means longevity equals vitality, at least the kind of longevity many people are talking about. Include vitality. So in other words, you can say lifespan equals health span. So when people talk about lifespan, they also talking about health span too. Nobody is really saying, you want to live longer, but spend your time in bed. I think, of course, you want to live longer, be active, and be mobile. Okay, so diet for muscle health. So what builds muscles? Protein? Yes, definitely protein does influence your muscle building, but also exercise, strength training. In fact, many experts say the exercise, the strength training is the most important factor to build your muscles. Now, according to Simon Hill, 80 to 90% of the muscle strength with 1.6 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight is achieved by 1.2 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. So that means increasing from 1.2 gram to 1.6 gram doesn't make that much difference. The key is resistance training, not so much about the protein amount. Also, there is a protein absorption. So this is a process of breaking down the protein you eat into smaller unit called amino acid, and then moving these amino acids from your digestive system into your bloodstream. Think of it like taking raw materials, amino acid, from your diet and getting them ready to be used by the body. This primarily happens in your intestines. So the gut is where nutrients are absorbed. If you have a leaky gut, for example, you are not absorbing protein sufficiently, even if you have a high protein intake. The intake of protein should be considered in conjunction with gut health. If the majority of your protein comes from animal sources, which often happens if you aim for a high protein intake, especially meat and dairy, you may not be optimizing your gut health. Now, so there are different bacteria in your gut, good bacteria, bad bacteria, and opportunistic bacteria. So the optimal ratio of those bacteria is considered to be good bacteria 2, bad bacteria 1, and opportunistic bacteria 7. How do the bad bacteria get increased? One cause is through animal-based protein and fat. And also dairy contains casein that can be a cause of a leaky gut. Therefore, animal-based high-protein diet may not support your muscle health, as some experts say. And there is also muscle protein synthesis. This is the process where your body uses those absorbed amino acids to build new proteins. These new proteins have various roles, such as building and repairing muscles, creating enzymes, hormones, and other important molecules. Think of it like using the raw materials, amino acid in your blood, to construct something new, like building a wall with bricks. This process happens throughout your body in your cells. And nutrients that support protein synthesis are, of course, protein, but also vitamin B6, folate, vitamin C, vitamin D, magnesium, and zinc. So, muscle does not equal protein. Muscle is built through protein and other nutrients and strength training. They are all important. Okay, so now diet for bone health. You do also need exercise to support your bone health, such as strength training, and weight-bearing exercise, such as jogging and walking. So you need calcium for your bone health and vitamin D, vitamin K2, and magnesium. And you can get calcium through like fish, like sardines, a good source of calcium, and or A2 milk. and then vitamin D from sardines and other kind of small fish as well. And then egg yolk and vitamin K2 from natto or cheese, magnesium from seaweed, nuts and seeds, beans, and whole grains. Okay, so diet for the gut health. Now, I talked about those different kind of bacteria. So what about good bacteria? How do they get increased? Through fiber, but also resistant starch, oligosaccharide. These are all called prebiotics. So you need prebiotics to support your gut health. But also you need probiotics, which you can often get from fermented food. Why do you need probiotics? Why prebiotics are not enough? So there is a bacterial relay taking place in your gut. And in this relay, there are three runners. The first runner, the second runner, and the third runner. Now, the goal of this relay is to produce propionic acid, butyrate, and acetic acid, which are all called short-chain fatty acid. So you want to create them. But to do that, you need many different ingredients. So first, you need prebiotics, which are fiber, oligosaccharides, and possibly resistant starch. And then so those like lactic acid bacteria or bifidobacteria or butyrate producing bacteria, these are called beneficial bacteria in your gut. They live in your gut. So you need prebiotics to feed them. However, the lactic acid bacteria and bifidobacteria, they're not good at breaking down fiber and oligosaccharides. I mean, they can, but they are not good at doing it. And they need the first runner's help. The first runner is called saccharifying bacteria, and natto bacteria is one of the most well-known saccharifying bacteria. So what saccharifying bacteria does is breaks down fiber and oligosaccharides into sugar, which makes so much easier for lactic acid bacteria and bifidobacteria to consume. And then using this sugar, lactic acid bacteria produce lactic acid, and the bifidobacteria produce acetic acid. And then, so they pass this to the third runner, which are propionic acid bacteria and butyrate producing bacteria. So lactic acid bacteria produce lactic acid so that propionic acid bacteria can use it to produce propionic acid. And then bifidobacteria produce acetic acid, which itself is a short-chain fatty acid, but also butyrate producing bacteria use acetic acid to produce butyrate. Therefore, you need all those different elements in your bacterial relay. You need both prebiotics and probiotics. Well, yeah, one more thing. So lactic acid bacteria, bifidobacteria, and butyrate producing bacteria all live in your gut. Therefore, you don't need to take them from outside. However, a lot of us have deficient amount of these bacteria, especially if you are older. Once we get old, the amount of these bacteria decrease. So we need to take them from outside as probiotics. And as far as natto bacteria is concerned, they don't live in your gut. So you need to always take it from outside. So to gain natto bacteria, you need to eat natto. Okay, so diet for brain health. What kind of food are good for the brain? Well, fatty fish, because it's got omega-3 fatty acid, which are considered to be good for the brain. And also nuts and seeds are good for the brain. And eggs contain choline, which is supposed to be good for the brain. And also berries, strawberries, blueberries, berries are good for the brain. And leafy greens. Okay, so how about diet for anti-aging? So David Sinclair say you need to suppress mTOR, and to do that, you need to practice low protein diet. Okay, so let's talk about autophagy and mTOR. Autophagy is a cellular recycling mechanism, and mTOR is the regulator of growth. They are kind of the opposite. If you activate mTOR, you suppress autophagy, and if you activate autophagy, you suppress mTOR. So if you and then autophagy is critical for longevity, and this is many people are talking about it all the time. That's why many people practice intermittent fasting to activate autophagy, and that's why many people exercise to activate autophagy. So how can you create a balance between the two? But because you do need mTOR too, I mean, you do need certain amount of protein. That means you naturally activate mTOR if you intake protein. Well, I think 1.2 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight is kind of a sweet spot. It's not too high and it's not too low either. So somewhere in between. And it's probably the sufficient amount. It changes depending on who you are, of course, depending on your age. If you're older individual, if you're over 65, you need to think about it very carefully. And depending on your situation, whether you're bedridden, whether you are moving, and if you're recovering, then you require higher protein intake. So you need to check it for your situation. But generally speaking, probably well, in my case at least anyway, 1.2 gram is sufficient so that I can increase the intake of other nutrients. And what is important is avoid constant high protein intake. So you can have a higher protein intake, but not every single day. I mean, all those high protein advocates say you need to have high protein every single day. If you don't, then you lose your muscle mass and so on. But I don't think so. I mean, I practice 36-hour fast once a week. Usually it's on Monday, but on Tuesday morning, I don't find my muscle is losing. My muscle is the same. Some people say if you're over the age of 60 and if you practice 36 hours fasting, you lose muscles. But that is not my experience. I have not lost my muscles. So I don't know. And then if David Sinclair is right, then you don't want to constantly have high protein intake. So that's what he says. That the chronic intake of protein is problematic. So if you avoid constant high protein intake, maybe that can mitigate the situation. And also calorie restriction as well. And the best way is to practice intermittent fasting once or twice a week. If you practice intermittent fasting every single day, then you might become nutrient deficient. If you practice it once or twice a week, the damage is very little. Probably the gain is bigger than your loss. But there are different ways of doing it. In my case, I practice it once a week, but I do a longer fast. I do 36 hours fast once a week. But you can do it maybe 16 hours fast twice a week or 3 times a week, or 24 hours fast once a week or twice a week. There are many different ways of doing it. Also, you can activate autophagy through exercise too. If you practice moderate intensity aerobic exercise for 60 minutes, you can activate autophagy tremendously. Also, this moderate intensity exercise that leaves you slightly breathless can increase butyrate producing bacteria in your gut. If you do this 30 minutes to 60 minutes 3 times a week. So if you do it 30 minutes twice a week and then 60 minutes once a week, then yeah, you can activate both autophagy and you can increase butyrate producing bacteria. Okay, so considering all those elements, meal plan for holistic health. First, you want to source your ingredient from Mago Yasashiko categories, which are beans, nuts and seeds, seaweeds, vegetables, fish, mushrooms, tubers, whole grains, fruit, and fermented food. What about other animal-based foods? Well, you can have eggs or chicken. It is better to have white meat than red meat. Red meat can cause some heart problems and also can feed bad bacteria in your gut. So if you want to have red meat, then up to 3 servings, which are 350 to 500 grams of cooked meat per week. And for daily, you can have cheese. Cheese is usually better because it's fermented. Or if you drink milk, maybe choose A2 milk because it has a different kind of casein which doesn't affect your gut. And for your protein sources, the ratio of plant and animal is 2 for plant and 2 for animal. And among the animal, 1 for fish and 1 for eggs and chicken, and maybe a little bit of red meat would be the sweet spot. Okay, so let's examine my breakfast. I have this natto salad and soy yogurt muesli with lots of nuts and seeds. So in this breakfast, I have natto bacteria from natto and bifidobacteria from the soy yogurt. Therefore, two probiotics, first runner and the second runner, to support that bacterial relay. And then I have Jako, which is the baby sardines in this salad that provide calcium, vitamin D for the bone health, and omega-3 fatty acid for the brain health. Also, natto has vitamin K2, which is good for the bone. And then this hijiki seaweed, it has magnesium, which is good for the bones too. And then fiber, there's plenty of fiber from vegetables, seaweed, natto, nuts and seeds, soy yogurt, and some fruit. And plenty of protein from natto, jako, and nuts and seeds and soy yogurt. And blueberries are good for the brain too. Now, if you cannot get hold of jako, then you can eat other small fish, such as sardine or other fish. The idea is eat the bones as well. The bone contains high amount of calcium. Therefore, any small fish is fine. Find a local small fish from the sea or from the lake or river, that is also fine too. Or you can always drink calcium and vitamin D fortified product. And for lunch, I have steamed vegetables, mixed beans, hummus, kimchi, fermented brown rice, and miso soup. So I have a mixed bean hummus, which is good because it is separate from soybeans. Since I had soybeans for breakfast, it's good to diversify my ingredient. Also, this is high in protein and high in fiber. And I have a whole grain, which can compensate amino acid profile from beans. So by eating beans and whole grain together, you can have a better amino acid score. and fermented food from fermented brown rice and kimchi and miso and mushrooms in the miso soup, and also there's some mushroom in the vegetable dish as well. And the steamed vegetables is good because I have salad in the morning. So by steaming vegetable, you can have a different kind of vegetable. So again, you create diversity in your ingredients. And seaweed, the wakame in the miso soup. And if you like, you can have Jako. I usually have a little bit of Jako. I have a little bit of Jako for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But if you don't have Jako, you can use Niboshi as well, or Niboshi powder. Niboshi powder is very convenient because you can put in the soup, or you can mix it with your vegetable dish, or you can even put that in your hummus as well. Or you can use niboshi as a dashi to make miso soup. Also, there are niboshi snacks. So this is the niboshi and nuts, and that's sold in Japan. And I don't know if you can find it in your region, but probably if you go to, big, Asian supermarket or somewhere, they may carry it. So you may want to check this out. Then you can have it snack in between to get additional calcium. And for dinner, I have these. This is a natto kind of prepared with other vegetables, and then tofu, that's boiled and seasoned spinach, and that's takuan, which is a daikon, a pickled daikon, and that's steamed vegetables, broccoli, carrots, I think burdock, and I think that's a shiitake mushrooms, and then that's a peas and fermented brown rice and miso soup with wakame and I think tofu inside and some other vegetables too. So yeah, and that's a sort of a typical dinner, but I mean it changes, every day. I mean sometimes I have macro and sometimes instead of rice, I have sweet potatoes, or sometimes for lunch, instead of rice, I might have potatoes of some kind. So it changes every day. But this is a kind of example of dinner I have. Great thing about this dinner is eating natto at night. So I had natto in the morning, but I usually have natto both for breakfast and dinner because at night you can utilize natto kinase in natto. Natto kinase protects you from blood clotting. And blood clotting often occur at night while you're sleeping. And if you have natto for dinner, then natto kinase kind of work for 10 to 12 hours. So it will work while you're sleeping. So it's a good timing to eat natto to take advantage of natto kinase. And also, basically, it's a protein rich, got natto, tofu, miso, and fermented brown rice. So again, whole grain and beans compensate each other about amino acid profile. And it's got some fermented, further fermented foods, so natto, pickles, and fermented brown rice and miso, and steamed vegetable and seasoned vegetable, the variation in your vegetable preparation. And for fiber, there are plenty of fiber, beans, tofu, vegetables, whole grains. So in many ways, it is a pretty balanced meal. So as I said before, I practice 36 hours fast on Monday, but 3 meals from Tuesday to Friday. These are plant-based with fish. And on the weekend, I include other animal-based foods such as eggs, chicken, fish, cheese, and occasionally red meat. Or you can make it like this. So plant-forward omnivore for the most days. So instead of dividing your week and the weekend, you can include some other animal-based food such as eggs and chicken. That might be easier to plan your meals. As long as you're meeting that ratio, one for plant, one for animal, there are many different ways of doing it. And for the fasting too, as I said before, you can practice 16 hours of fast 3 times a week, or just do one prolonged fast once a week. There are many different ways of doing it. Okay, to understand the principle behind it, please read chapter 3, The Ideal Diet to Increase Health Span in Live Wiser, Not Smarter. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching. Again, my name is Hachiaki Takamiya, the author of Live Wiser, Not Smarter. Please give me your thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And please leave your comment. How about you? What are your meal plans? Please share your situation in the comment section below. Thank you. Now, you may be wondering about Jako and where to find it. Well, you may find this video interesting.